I never meant to remember the exact shade of her sweater. But I do. A muted green, soft-looking, like something that had been washed too many times. She stood at the counter of the small cafe near the bus stop, scanning the chalkboard menu like she didn't already know what she wanted. I'd been coming there since the start of the semester. Mornings were quiet, the place mostly filled with early workers tapping laptops or reading the paper. That morning felt the same, except she was there. Medium drip. Splash of cream. She spoke it almost to herself, the way you order something you've said 100 times. I noticed the barista smiled like she already knew. When it was my turn, she stepped aside, careful not to brush against me. I caught the faintest trace of something, lavender, maybe soap, maybe lotion. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. I ordered my usual. Sat near the window. Pretended not to notice when she chose the table across. It wasn't dramatic. Just two people drinking coffee, eyes wandering toward the glass, the street. But I noticed things. The way she held the cup with both hands, as if she wanted the heat to last. The way she shifted her bag twice before settling it at her feet. I texted a friend, half a thought, nothing important, then deleted it before hitting send. I don't know why I couldn't look away. Maybe it was her eyes when she finally glanced at me. Not quick, like most people. Longer, as if she was measuring whether to hold it or not. I looked down first. Always easier that way. A few mornings later, she was there again. Same sweater. Same order. This time she laughed softly when the barista mixed it up. They keep trying to make me adventurous, she said, half to herself, half in my direction. I folded the corner of my napkin without thinking. You don't strike me as a caramel macchiato type. Her eyes flicked toward me, surprised, then amused. And you do? I shook my head. Black coffee. Too predictable. Something passed between us then. Not flirtation exactly. More like recognition. The kind you only feel when you've been drifting quietly, and suddenly someone else drifts near. The next time, she remembered my order before I spoke. Medium black, right? Her voice had that calm certainty, like she'd been paying attention when she didn't have to. My throat went dry, though I tried to make it sound easy. Guess I'm even more predictable than I thought. She smiled but didn't answer. Days turned into a pattern. Not arranged, not promised. Just found. Sometimes she'd be there, sometimes not. When she was, the room felt steadier, though my hands always fidgeted with the cup sleeve, tearing at the cardboard edge. I never asked her name. She never asked mine. It felt fragile, like naming it would break the thing between us. That morning, though, she leaned closer as she picked up her drink. Not close enough to touch, but enough that her voice dropped. This stays between us. Her tone wasn't stern. More like a warning she didn't want to give. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. I sat there long after she left, coffee cooling in front of me, napkin torn into small, careful squares. And I kept wondering, between us, what exactly had she meant? The next time wasn't at the cafe. It was later, on a Sunday afternoon, when I ran into her at the small grocery store down the street. She was standing in front of the tea aisle, frowning like she'd been staring too long. I almost didn't say anything. I could have walked past, pretended not to notice her. But something in me didn't want to. Too many choices? I asked. She turned, startled at first, then softened when she recognized me. I've been buying the same one for years, she admitted, lifting a box of chamomile before putting it back. And suddenly it doesn't taste the same. That happens with people too, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes lingered on me, like she was deciding whether to take that as a joke. Then she smiled faintly, but there was something heavier beneath it. You're too young to say things like that. The words stung, though she hadn't meant them unkindly. I shrugged, trying to make it casual. I've had my share of things losing their taste. We ended up walking out together, her bag heavier than mine. I offered to carry it. She hesitated, then let me. The handles dug into my fingers, but I didn't care. It felt like I was being trusted with something I shouldn't hold. On the way back, she told me about her son, my age, maybe a little older, living in another city now. He doesn't call often, she said, half apologizing. But that's normal. I guess. You grow up, you make your own world. I wanted to say something, but my throat closed. Instead, I just nodded, adjusting the bag in my hands. When we reached her building, she gestured toward the door. You want some tea? I can repay you for carrying this. Her apartment was quiet, filled with little signs of a life lived alone, books stacked by the chair, a blanket folded too neatly on the couch, a single mug waiting on the counter. She set water to boil, moving around the kitchen like she'd done it 1,000 times. I sat at the table, hands restless, tracing the wood grain. She glanced at me once, catching the movement, then poured 2 cups. Chamomile, she said, sliding one toward me. Even if it doesn't taste the same anymore. We drank in silence for a while. The tea was bitter, but I didn't mind. What I noticed more was how close she sat. Close enough that I could see the faint lines near her eyes, the way her fingers curled around the handle, steady but tired. She broke the quiet. You remind me of him sometimes. My son. Not in the way you look, but, she trailed off, shaking her head. It's the way you notice things. Something twisted in me, wanting to be seen as myself, not a reflection of someone else. But also, wanting to be seen at all. I laughed softly, to break the tension. That's not the worst thing I've been compared to. Her smile was brief, but her eyes stayed on me a moment too long. Then she looked away, sipping her tea like she needed it as an excuse. I told her about my classes, about staying up too late scrolling through messages I never sent. I don't know why I said it. Usually I keep things like that to myself. But with her, the silence pulled confessions out. Everyone does that, she said gently. You're not the only one. The words shouldn't have meant much. But they did. By the time I stood to leave, the light outside had shifted, dusk pushing in through her curtains. She walked me to the door, her hand brushing the frame as if steadying herself. Thank you for the help, she said. And then, almost nothing, but enough. Her hand rested briefly on my arm, light as air, before pulling back. A polite gesture, probably. A simple thank you. But I carried it with me all the way home. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that evening at her apartment, I found myself watching the cafe door more often than I should have. Sometimes she came. Sometimes she didn't. And when she didn't, the room felt louder somehow. Too many voices, too much clinking glass. One Tuesday, she slid into the seat across from me without asking. A faint smile, like she'd been deciding whether to come over at all. You always sit by the window, she said, folding her hands on the table. Habit. I shrugged, but my chest tightened at the attention. I like watching people. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. That sounds lonelier than you mean it to. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. She wasn't wrong. We sat in a quiet rhythm, her stirring her tea, me tearing the edge of my napkin into thin strips. Little motions filling the silence. Then the barista came by, cheerful. You two make quite the pair, she teased, setting down our cups. The words hit harder than they should have. I saw the way her smile faltered, how she looked down quickly, fingers tightening around the mug. Just neighbors, she said too fast. My throat felt dry. I forced a laugh, though it sounded thin. Yeah, just neighbors. But the air between us had shifted. Every glance suddenly felt weighted, too noticeable. She leaned back, distance in her posture now, as if she needed to redraw the line. I wanted to say something, anything, to fix it. Instead, I just traced circles on the rim of my cup. When we left, we walked the same way, close enough to feel the brush of her coat against my arm, but not close enough to touch. At her building entrance, she stopped, looked at me, then at the ground. I shouldn't. Her voice faded, unfinished. I waited, but she didn't continue. I wanted to ask, shouldn't what? Instead, I stuffed my hands into my pockets, nodded like I understood. The silence between us was longer than it should have been. Too long for neighbors. Too long for casual. She reached for her keys, fumbled them once. Her hand trembled, just slightly, but I saw it. And then, her eyes lifted, catching mine. For a second, neither of us looked away. The kind of pause that pulls the world thinner around you. I thought, this is it. She's going to. But the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairwell inside. A man's voice calling out to someone above. The spell broke. She stepped back, quickly, almost guiltily. "Good night," she said, too soft. I nodded. My mouth was open, words right there, but nothing came out. The door closed behind her with a heavy click. I stood there in the cold, staring at the grain of the wood, replaying the moment when it almost became something else. And I couldn't stop wondering, if the footsteps hadn't come, what would have happened? It rained the next few days, steady sheets that blurred the streetlights and made the sidewalk shine. I almost convinced myself she wouldn't come out in it. That maybe I shouldn't either. But there she was, umbrella tilted awkwardly as she tried to juggle her grocery bag. I caught up without thinking, slipping my hand under the bag before it tipped. "You'll tear the handles that way," I said. She glanced at me, startled, then let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "You always show up when things are heavier than they look." We walked side by side, my shoulder damp from the edge of her umbrella. The rhythm of water on the pavement filled the silence. At the corner, she slowed. "Want to sit for a minute? The rain's not stopping anytime soon." There was a bench under a tree, not much shelter, but enough. We sat, bags at our feet, raindrops slipping through the leaves in uneven beats. She folded her hands in her lap, then unfolded them, restless. "I used to come here when my son was little," she said quietly. "He'd climb the fence, run until he fell. I'd sit right here and watch." Her fingers tapped against her knee, hesitant. "Feels strange, being back without him." I didn't answer right away. The image hung in the air, the younger version of her, waiting, watching. The absence of it now. "Finally," I said, "you don't have to explain. Some places just remember things for you." Her eyes flicked toward me. A small smile, but her throat moved like she was swallowing something down. The rain thinned, but neither of us stood. I wanted to ask her everything I wasn't supposed to. Why she kept looking away, why her laugh always sounded like it broke off too soon. Instead I said, "You don't look old enough to have a kid my age." She gave me a look, half warning, half curious. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" My voice came out softer than I intended. Her breath caught, almost inaudible. She turned toward the street, watching a car pass. "Because it makes this harder." The words landed sharp. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My hands clenched on the bench edge. "Harder how?" I asked finally. She shook her head, but too slowly, like she was answering herself more than me. "You know how." The rain stopped completely, but we didn't move. Her hair clung damp at her temple. I wanted to reach out, brush it back. My fingers twitched on my knee. She looked down at her hands, then at me. "You shouldn't sit here with me like this. People see what they want to see. And I." She cut herself off, pressing her lips together. The silence stretched. My heart beat too loud for how calm we looked, just two people on a bench. "I don't care what people see," I said. The words surprised me, honest and unguarded. Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, and for a moment she didn't look away. The air between us tightened, fragile as glass. I leaned forward, not enough to close the space, but enough that the possibility was there. She didn't move back. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't make me answer something I can't." The words tangled in my chest. Half a confession, half a warning. We sat like that, close, still, waiting. I thought about what it would mean if I crossed the line. About the way her hand had lingered on my arm before. About the door clicking shut too fast. About every silence that felt louder than words. The moment swelled, unbearable in its quiet. And then she asked, so softly I almost missed it, "What do you really want from me?" The rain started again, thin and cold. But I couldn't move. The question hung between us for days, even after we left the bench in the rain. "What do you really want from me?" I kept hearing it at night, lying awake, the words looping until they frayed. But when I went back to the cafe the next morning, she wasn't there. Not the next day either. Or the next. At first I told myself it was coincidence. People have lives. Schedules change. But after a week, the empty chair across from mine started to feel like an answer. I stopped going for a while, stayed in my room, scrolling through half-finished texts. Hope you're okay. Did I say something wrong? I keep thinking about. None of them got sent. One evening, I saw her outside her building. She was carrying a box down to the recycling bin, hair tied back, eyes tired. I almost called out, but then a man stepped out of a car and walked toward her. Older, with the kind of confidence that takes up space. He took the box from her hands easily, too easily, and she let him. They spoke quietly. I couldn't hear, but I saw her laugh, soft, guarded. The kind of laugh you use when you know someone too well. I didn't wait around to see more. The next day, I sat in class and couldn't focus. My professor's words blurred into static. All I could think about was that look on her face, familiar, practiced. Like it belonged to another version of her I hadn't been invited to know. I didn't go to the cafe, didn't walk by her building. I tried to convince myself I was being dramatic. She could have friends, family, an ex who still drifted in and out. None of it meant anything. But it did. A week later, I finally saw her again. Not at the cafe, but on the sidewalk outside the bookstore. She was holding a bag of paperbacks, struggling with the weight. Our eyes met across the street. She froze first, then looked away quickly, as if she hadn't seen me. I crossed anyway. Hey. Her voice was polite, distant. Hi. I gestured toward the bag. Want me to? No, I've got it. Too fast, too sharp. Then softer. Thank you. Something in my chest folded. We walked a few steps together, but it wasn't the same. Her words clipped, her gaze somewhere past me. Like she was talking to a neighbor again, not someone who'd sat on a bench with her in the rain. Finally she said, I think we've blurred things a little. Don't you? My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She didn't wait. I don't want you caught in the middle of my mess, she said, adjusting the bag on her arm. You're young. You should. She stopped herself, shook her head. Forget it. I wanted to ask about the man, about the laugh, about what we almost said. But my throat stayed closed. At her building, she paused. Take care of yourself, okay? And just like that, she was gone. That night, I typed out a message. I don't care about the mess. I just care about you. My thumb hovered over send. But I didn't send it. I stared at the glow of the screen until it dimmed, then set the phone down. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I didn't expect to see her again. Weeks had passed since that clipped goodbye, each one duller than the last. I'd stopped waiting for her at the cafe, stopped glancing at her window when I walked home. And then one night, late, colder than it should have been for spring, I saw her sitting outside on the stoop of her building. A sweater pulled tight around her, a mug cupped in her hands. I slowed, uncertain. I could have kept walking. Maybe I should have. But her eyes lifted, catching mine. No startle this time. No quick avoidance. Just tired recognition. Couldn't sleep? I asked, voice low. She gestured to the spot beside her. Coffee at 6 p.m. was a mistake. I sat down, careful not to let our shoulders touch. The concrete was cold through my jeans. For a while, neither of us spoke. A car rolled past, the hum fading into silence again. She sipped, staring at the street. Finally, she said, I wasn't fair to you. The words startled me more than if she'd shouted. You don't owe me anything, I murmured. Her hand tightened around the mug. That's not true. I pulled you into something I had no right to. Then I disappeared. I exhaled, rubbing my palms against my knees. You didn't pull me anywhere. I walked. She turned, studied me, eyes flicking between mine like she was searching for something. And why did you? I hesitated. The answer had been sitting in me for months, but saying it aloud meant tipping the balance into something we couldn't undo. Because you saw me, I said finally. When most people don't. She looked away, shoulders rising, falling. That's not enough. It's more than enough, I whispered. Her breath caught. She set the mug down on the step, both hands suddenly free, restless. Do you know what this would cost me? My son if he knew. My friends. Even me. I'm not. She stopped, shaking her head. I'm not the woman you imagine I am. The words cut, but I didn't move. "I don't need you to be anything else," I said. Her eyes closed briefly, like she was bracing against something. When she opened them again, they shone in the dim light. "You're too young to understand what happens after, how it unravels." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I understand what it feels like right now." The silence that followed was sharp, alive. She shifted slightly, her knee brushing mine. Neither of us pulled back. I thought about all the times I'd wanted to ask, to say something, to reach out, and all the times I hadn't. This felt like the last chance, though no one had said so. "You don't have to want this," I said quietly. "But don't tell me it isn't here." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She stared at me like she might deny it, but her hand moved first, resting lightly on mine. A simple touch, barely there, but steady. I didn't move, didn't close the distance. Just let the weight of it settle. Her voice was softer than the night around us. "I can't promise you anything." "I didn't ask you to," I said. Her fingers curled just slightly, as if testing the space between letting go and holding on. And then she exhaled, almost a laugh, almost a sob, and whispered, "Okay." That was all. No declarations, no guarantees. Just that small word, trembling in the air between us. I didn't smile, not fully, but my chest eased for the first time in weeks. Sometimes the biggest choice is staying exactly where you are. Time didn't change everything at once. It moved in small, almost invisible shifts, like the way seasons creep in before you realize the air has turned. We didn't start meeting every day. Sometimes weeks passed between the moments we found each other. But when we did, it felt less like an accident and more like something we both allowed. The cafe became ours again. She'd sit across from me, chamomile in hand, though she never mentioned it, not tasting the same anymore. I'd still order my medium black, predictable as ever. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we'd just sit, the silence filling the space between clinking cups and low chatter. One morning, I checked the clock and smiled. It was 8:47 a.m. She noticed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, though she caught the look on my face. She didn't press. But later, when she left, she brushed her fingers lightly against my sleeve. A tiny acknowledgement. I saw it too. At the bench where we once sat in the rain, we sat again, this time in sunlight. She told me about her son's last phone call, how he'd finally asked if she was seeing anyone. She'd laughed it off, but her hands fidgeted as she spoke. "And what did you say?" I asked. She gave me a wry look. I said no, because I don't know what to call this. I nodded, not needing more. The wordless part between us was enough. Life threaded itself quietly. She started buying 2 mugs instead of 1, leaving one on the counter in case I stopped by. I'd help carry groceries without asking. Once, I fixed the loose hinge on her kitchen cabinet, and she made tea afterward, both of us pretending not to notice the comfort of the routine. There were still pauses, still moments when she'd pull back, remind me with her silence of the years between us, of what it could cost. But then I'd catch her watching me, eyes soft, and the space between hesitation and acceptance grew smaller each time. One evening, we found ourselves on her doorstep again, much like before. The light above flickered, throwing shadows across her face. She leaned against the frame, tired from the day. "You always wait until the last minute to say goodnight," she teased. "Maybe I like the last minutes best," I replied. Her laugh was quiet, almost to herself. She didn't move to end it quickly this time. Just stood there with me, the cool air brushing against us, her hand eventually resting at her side until my fingers brushed against it. Barely, enough to let her know I was still here. And she didn't pull away. It never became a storybook ending. There was no announcement, no sudden shift. Just 2 lives that began to fold into each other, piece by piece. Coffee cups, grocery bags, late walks. My jacket left draped over her chair. Her book resting on my desk, forgotten. One morning, I found her already at the cafe, waiting by the window. She slid my coffee across before I even sat down. "You're late," she said softly. I checked my phone. 8:47, right on time. I smiled, and she knew why. She shook her head, amused, but her eyes stayed on me. We didn't need more than that. Because somehow, against all the quiet doubts and pauses, we'd arrived at something that felt steady. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but ours. And that was enough.